All right, hello everyone, this is Stephanie. We're just waiting a couple minutes here to let everyone get logged on, and we'll get started in just a minute. This should be all right, hello everyone. This is Stephanie Scott. I think we were having a little bit of microphone echo back, but I think we're sounding good now. You all are on mute, and the only way you can communicate with us is via the dialog boxes on your control panel. If anyone, for some reason, hears an echo, please let me know, but it sounds good on our end, so we're just going to move forward. I know most of you on this call, so I don't think we need a huge introduction to who we are and who I am individually. I am going to have a couple of my coworkers, Jayla and Sophie, who you guys are all familiar with as well, be presenting along the way, but I will sort of be moderating this whole webinar. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Stephanie Scott. I'm the Leadership and Education Program Manager here at Water Education Colorado. I oversee all the different education opportunities that we have, as well as our leadership programs, which means that this statewide Water Education Action Plan would fall underneath my programming, hence why I'm leading this webinar. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for your interest in this program that we are going to be kickstarting here. I do want to let you know a couple things. So this is being recorded, and all of you will be receiving a full recording that includes the slides as well as the audio as soon as the webinar is over, as well as that will include next steps, which I'll explain that later. But it is being recorded. You guys will all get the recording, so no need to frantically take notes. You guys will all get the slides as well. Again, you all are muted. That's just a function of the webinar to cut down on noise. But we really do hope that you guys have questions and that we can answer any of those on this webinar. So if you do have questions along the way, please enter them into the questions dialog box. You can access that on your control panel. There should be an arrow next to questions, and you click that arrow to open it up, and there should be a space there for you to type in a question. So type in questions along the way. We will be moderating and looking through those, but we won't be answering any of the questions until the end, just for flow of presentation, as well as some of your questions might be answered along the way. So know that we're documenting your questions, we're keeping tracks of them, but we're not going to be answering them until the end. I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So this webinar is the kickoff of the statewide Water Education Action Plan. We literally just got approved for funding for this a couple weeks ago through the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And so our goal of this webinar is to really kick off this year-long process by informing all of you of what is happening, how to get engaged, what the process is going to look like. We will be very transparent that we don't have all the answers right during this webinar right at this moment, but we are hoping that through giving you an overview of what is planned, the different roles of the organizations in the state, as well as how individuals can contribute and how we're hoping to gather input from across the state. By letting you know that today will sort of help us sort of formulate what all those final answers are going to be. So with that, here's the agenda for the day. We're going to go over a little bit of setting the stage. So how do we get to this point? Why are we the ones that are spearheading this effort? Then we'll go into a little bit of what we're hoping to achieve through this plan and through the process. We will review then the process timeline, how people are going to be incorporating data, gathering data, sort of how, just making sure that we are being inclusive as possible throughout. Some possible outcomes, some things that we have already heard from people across Colorado on what they would like to see, as well as some next steps. So with that, we acknowledge that while we are spearheading this effort, we do not have all the answers, and that we are hoping that through this year-long process with all of you, we could really, dive deep and get something that is actionable and usable, that we can all really move forward as a state when it comes to water education. And our goal is definitely not to just create another plan for a plan. We're really hoping that at the end we are identifying real tangible steps that we can all take that are moving forward to benefit local communities, local education efforts, as well as statewide efforts. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jayla Poppleton, who's our executive director. Most of you know her as well, and she's going to start the conversation about setting the stage and why we're all here today.
All right, thanks, Stephanie, and thank you all for joining us to spend some time learning about this plan and what we have in mind and how we'd like to work with all of you going forward. The genesis behind doing this project really is born from Colorado's water plan itself, which is now just over 2.5 years old. As you know, there is the Outreach, Education, and Public Engagement chapter at the end of the plan, which we were thrilled to see included. We had an active role, as I'm sure many of you did as well, in providing input into the development of that chapter. And 3 major actions that appear at the very end of that chapter that the CWCB established as goals going forward were to create a new outreach, education, and public engagement grant fund, which they successfully did last year with an initial $1 million investment. And actually, it is that fund that is helping to pay for part of this project. In addition, the second goal that was outlined was to create a data-based water education plan for the state. And so that's where this project comes in. And then finally, improving the use of existing state resources. But we want to focus on that data-based water education plan. Basically, we have been speaking with the CWCB for quite a while now about the role that we might play as the leading organization working statewide in water education to help put this plan together, working with all of our partners across the state. And so we're really excited to be getting this process underway. So a little bit more about why we feel that we're uniquely positioned to fulfill this task and help the CWCB accomplish this goal is, the experience that we have in working for the last 16 years across Colorado, helping Coloradans to speak fluent water through our educational programs, which have been developed and honed over time, and which many of you have been a big part of. So thank you for the partnership that we have with each of you. We also just are a leader in providing sort of an umbrella for other local educators and outreach professionals through our Water Educator Network. That's a statewide network of water education and outreach professionals that we work closely with to provide trainings and opportunities for collaboration. And I have another slide on that, so we'll talk more about that in a moment. This is also an identified need that we have heard from those network members who've expressed a desire to us for a shared strategy that would result in a coordinated vision and coordinated action statewide that would help us leverage resources and make all of our efforts more meaningful and more impactful. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment as well. And then just the history of the relationships that we've had in the state. So from 2008 to 2015, we facilitated the public education participation and outreach work group with the CWCB and the IBCC. So we've worked closely with those outreach professionals for the unique role that they play with the roundtables. We also managed the Water Education Task Force between 2008 and 2012. We were a leading player in the Water 2012 campaign, which is the last major instance when water education professionals came together all across the state for a coordinated, very well coordinated series of educational opportunities. And then, of course, our Water Educator Network, which has now been growing over the last 3 or 3.5 years. So a little bit more about the Water Educator Network. This was really an outgrowth of the Water Education Task Force in communicating that bringing educators together to look at where we have overlap and where we have resources that could be shared, where we could better learn from each other was a unique opportunity, and that Water Education Colorado was situated to convene. And so we established the network, like I said, about 3.5 years ago. Currently, we have approximately 65 members that are coming from 50 different organizations across Colorado. The group is very diverse. We have professors, researchers, teachers, staff from federal agencies and local governments, water utility professionals, and then nonprofit outreach coordinators. We provide professional development trainings across the course of a year, focused on different topics, and opportunities for those educators to come together and share resources, to connect with one another, network, and identify opportunities for collaboration. And then as part of that program, we also have become the host institution in Colorado right now. I believe we're the sole host institution for Project WET curriculum, which is K through 12 curriculum that was developed in Montana by the National Project WET organization. And so we are offering a series of trainings over the course of a year to train facilitators and to train teachers who can take that curriculum into classrooms. We do plan to use our Water Educator Network as a conveyor of information and updates around the Strategic Water Education Action Plan. So we do maintain an email list of people who have expressed interest in receiving updates through our Water Educator Network newsletter, which comes out every other month and is produced by our Education and Outreach Coordinator, Sophie Kirschenman, who many of you know. And so we are going to be inviting you at the end of this process, if you would like to stay engaged with providing input into this plan or following its progress. We will be doing that through that same email list, so we'll be inviting you to join that list. This is just a little bit about the funding that is backing this project. So we had a unique opportunity this year to not only pursue a grant through the Colorado Water Plan Engagement and Innovation Grant Fund to support this work, which really dovetails well with the Colorado Water Plan's objectives as we demonstrated, but also to match those grant funds with a grant from the Think Water program, which is based out of the University of Wisconsin and is funded through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So that's a program that's been around for the last decade and has been working with water education professionals nationally, and I believe even spreading internationally to help those professionals think through their programs, think through how to build and design those programs in a way that will have the most meaningful impact on their audiences in terms of affecting how people think about water. And so we're really excited to be bringing some of that program, which is commonly termed systems thinking, into how we approach development of this plan and this project. So we envision that in each instance where we convene a group of stakeholders and collaborators to have input into the plan, that we will be providing at least some high level of training on systems thinking and the Think Water approach. So everyone who's involved in this process will be exposed to that on some level. And that will just be part of how we also build out and think through our process for the project. So the combination of those grants, it's about 50-50 is funding development of the plan. And so now I'd like to introduce Sophie Kirschenman, who is our Education and Outreach Coordinator. In that role, she is also the coordinator for the Water Educator Network program, and she's going to be going through our project objectives for the plan.
Awesome. Pictures. Thank you, Jayla, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar today. We're really excited to kick this project off and to get all of your involvement from the very beginning. So I want to talk a little bit today about some of our project objectives, and I think that before I even dive into these, it's really important to stress the fact that this plan is definitely not meant to overshadow any of the important work that you all are already doing, and I know that there are so many great programs and really interesting projects taking place all across the state, and also a variety of, basin water education action plans as well. And so this effort is really just, it's an effort to leverage existing resources and to amplify the efforts that you all are already engaged in, and not to overshadow anything that is already taking place. So overall, our project objective is to increase the amount, quality, and effectiveness of water education activities statewide through improved coordination and leveraging of existing resources. And that really identifies with us and what we do as an organization, and specifically what we try to accomplish through our Water Educator Network. For example, every year we host a Water Festival Coordinators Gathering that brings together not all, but a majority of Water Festival coordinators across the state, and they can share resources and, challenges and lessons learned, and it's really a way for them to leverage their existing resources. And so one of our objectives is to look at other ways that we can leverage those existing resources and coordinate with one another where it makes sense. And that doesn't necessarily mean us coming from a top-down approach. It's also just, what coordination can occur among the basins and among programs and projects where that makes sense. Now we're going to kind of dive into that big sort of overarching goal a little bit more specifically, or in a little bit more detail. So first off, we're going to identify strategies to amplify and support local activities and scale up effective local programs. I know that there are a lot of really great local programs, and some of them have been super successful in, being statewide or translating from basin to basin. And I think others are still looking for ways to break into different basins, or I know that there are some areas that they're looking to adopt programs that are shown have been proven to be really effective in certain places. Two, to cross-pollinate educational messages and outreach activities from different geographical areas. Some of the feedback that we've received over the past, or maybe that I've received over the past about a year, is just that some people are really looking for a coordinated, messaging around different outreach activities, and is there a way that we can get some more statewide leveraging behind some of these programs and goals, and is there a way to do that? And so that's one of the things we're definitely going to be diving into, is just ways to look at the great work that's going on in one basin, how can that be used in another basin, and vice versa. All right, we're also going to identify and prioritize activities that will require investment from multiple entities over the next 3 to 5 years, and work collaboratively to secure investment and complete those activities. So I know that funding is always going to be a big, it's a big challenge. It's a challenge for all of us in every, program that we launch and every project that we try to accomplish. And I think that there are definitely some opportunities for different organizations to work together to secure grants and secure funding by having these more collaborative efforts. And so we're trying to identify areas where that makes sense, whether that is within one basin or across basins. We sort of have yet to work out what that looks like, but definitely trying to find ways to secure more resources for these programs. We also like to identify, and probably not through this project will we actually fill in those gaps, but at least identify the gaps in water education where they exist, and then identify strategies to start filling in some of those gaps, and what messaging is reaching different parts of the state, and what messaging really needs to reach different parts of the state. And then this is something that definitely came out of, we held a focus group last year among a small group of Water Educator Network members, and I also kind of engaged in a bunch of semi-structured interviews with Water Educator Network members. And one of the common themes was that educators are really looking for a unified vision and a common voice around water education. And so I think that this is a really great way to sort of tackle that goal and get us all sort of on the same page, and really to better understand how each of our programs and each of our activities are leading to this common goal and fulfilling this unified vision for water education in Colorado. All right. Next up, we're looking to develop a list of prioritized activities to be used as a tool to secure funding. So sometimes a good way to secure funding is just to say, look, it was identified as being a prioritized activity. It's right here in this plan. And, you know, there are definitely cases where that can be used to leverage funding and to make a case for getting more funding. Next up, a common set of metrics that can be used to evaluate water education across the state. So we recently met with Nona Shipman from the One World, One Water Center, and she has been engaged in developing an asset map by basically meeting with water education stakeholders all across the state and figuring out, you know, what are their needs, what are they doing. And one of the things that she mentioned to us in a recent meeting was that a lot of people really identified that evaluation is a key component, but that they're having trouble actually, you know, going through with that. They know that they should be doing it. They know that it's important, but they just don't really know how to get started or have the resources to really fulfill that right now. So we're trying to think of a way that we can develop a common set of metrics that might be, you know, applied in different areas, or at least that would be available as a resource to those who want to utilize a common set of metrics. And then we can evaluate water education across the state in different basins, can compare what's going on, and you can compare a little bit more easily when you have common standards. And then also better mechanisms for collaboration on water education programs across basins. You know, I kind of mentioned this already, but really just ways that different basins can work together on programs. You know, and I know, for example, you know, River Watch is a really successful program that's been utilized around the state. And are there other ways that different, you know, successful education programs can be utilized in different basins, or even just resources that can be shared more easily across basins? Is there a platform that we can create for that, or is there a platform that you're already using that we can amplify? You know, what does that look like in the future?
Something popping up that his audio is disconnecting, so I wonder if we should ask you to connect by phone.
Okay. Can everyone hear us right now?
Yeah, is there anyone having any issues? We've had someone say that they're getting a message saying their audio is being disconnected, but that person is connected through the computer, not through a phone. And so if you do have any audio issues, maybe try calling back in, but I'm not seeing anything from anyone else. Just wanted to check in on that really quickly. And also a reminder, we are getting some questions in, and so if you do have questions along the way, please type them in the question box. We are looking at those, and we will definitely answer those at the end. So with that, I am going to take it over from here. Thank you, Jayla and Sophie. And I'm going to talk about what we have sort of in the books for now. So like I said, we just got the funding approved through CWCB a couple weeks ago, and this is the kickoff of us sort of talking about what the year is gonna look like. And we don't have all the answers right now, but we're gonna fill that in, fill you all in as this process develops more in the next month, which we're really gonna be focusing on it more. So we have identified a couple different ways for people to get involved and provide input to this whole entire process. So we talked a lot about the Water Educator Network. Both Sophie and Jayla hit on that. I think you all are familiar with what the Water Educator Network is, and we are envisioning that that network really will be instrumental in building not only the plan, but then activating it going forward. And so our Water Educator Network will sort of be an umbrella group that is participating in this process throughout the next year. In addition to the WEN network, we've identified 3 different levels of sort of how you can get involved. And the way that we have identified this is sort of core collaborators are going to be this core group of people that we are looking from start to finish to really help us think through the process, think through the input, think through all the data that we're getting, and really define the path going forward with us. This is going to be a small group of people. We're anticipating that it probably won't be more than 15, but that number is not set. And really it's going to be put together with diversity in mind. And so we are looking for people that represent all the different basins, that represent all different educator stakeholder groups. So, you know, K-12, teachers, universities, watershed groups, PEPO liaisons. And we're really looking at this group that can help us think through and make sure we're not missing anything as we're developing the state plan, and give us that local level perspective. And so we will be asking the most time from them. We're anticipating over the next year that's going to look about like 25 to 30 hours. We'll kick it off with a group meeting face-to-face with this group of core collaborators in August, and then we will have a final meeting with the core collaborators once all the data is collected in January, February-ish. And they will then at that second meeting help us think through the final format on how this is all going to be compiled and used. And then we are asking the core collaborators to participate in some of the meetings that we're having across the state as well. Then we have a collaborator level, and essentially collaborators are going to be participating in one of 4 different meetings that we're having throughout the state. We have some tentative locations of those, and I'll go over that later, but essentially we would be hosting an all-day brainstorm, strategic planning, sort of intense workshop with educators from, I mean, there's only 4 meetings across the state, so we're not going to be making assumptions that everyone that is attending that meeting is from that basin. So we will have mechanisms in place at these meetings so that you can attend any one of the 4 meetings, and that your voice will not only be inputted into state level data as well as local level data, even if that's not necessarily the basin that you live in or that you're representing. The geographic diversity of the meetings, just so we can best try to accommodate people and get the most people in the room. But again, we'll go over a little bit more of what those meetings look like in a minute. So collaborators, we're thinking that your contribution would be about 10 hours of work over the next year. And again, most of that is just attending that one meeting. But then once we get the draft plan, we would be looking for you to provide some feedback into the draft plan before it's finalized. And then our third level of contribution is a remote collaborator, and the time on this will vary depending on how much feedback you wanted to give us or submit. And essentially, this is going to be a mechanism for people to get their voice heard, get their resources, all the work that they're doing heard without actually physically participating, if that's not an option or if there's not an interest to do so. So here is an overarching timeline of what all this is going to look like. And you don't have to read through this in all detail. We're going to go through each of these boxes in more detail now. All right, so between now and August, we are working to sort of set the stage and build our platform, build our process for how this is all going to happen, how we're analyzing data, how we're getting data, making sure that we are identifying the right people, that we are talking to people, we're identifying these different levels of collaboration. And so really the next month, 2 months really, is going to be all of us here at WECO picking through the data and coming up with our plan. We know that we will be at the August 21st meeting that all of the PEPO coordinators are going to be at, that's at Water Congress in Avon, and we will be doing a version of training / stakeholder sort of brainstorming with the PEPO group at that meeting, but also in August, and potentially in coordination with that, we will have our first collaborator meeting as well, our core collaborator meeting. Also from July, starting now, but beyond that August meeting, we are going to be really working to identify all the different stakeholders that could be involved in this process. And with that, we will be developing up the process for the external input and collections, those remote collaborators. And so we do not have that defined right now on how that external input, if you're not coming in person, is going to look like. But by September, we will have that process rolled out, and we will be reaching out to everyone that has indicated they want to participate remotely on how they can do that. All right, from July really to the end of the year, these are different resources that have already, or efforts or surveys that have already happened that we have identified that we want to tap into to help start the baseline for where this action plan goes. And Sophie mentioned a little bit the One World, One Water Center asset map that Nona Shipman has been working on. She is finalizing that now and will be delivering her final report to CWCV on the 30th, so here in a couple of days. So we'll be able to incorporate all the work that she's done over the last year into sort of a baseline overview of what education is already happening across the state. We are currently also involved in a statewide effort for a public awareness survey that the Omni Institute is conducting, and there's not a firm timeline on that right now, but we are one of the key stakeholders engaged in that, and so we will be sure to incorporate whatever baseline data or awareness or public messaging that we could possibly use as part of this action plan to incorporate it along the way. We'll also be looking at existing basin implementation plans so we can connect the outreach efforts locally to bigger water projects happening. We think that's important. We will be reviewing all of the water education action plans that all of the basin roundtables have created locally that's specific to water education happening. We'll be reviewing a lot of different past surveys, such as, our education task force that Jayla mentioned, Water 2012. I know a lot of different groups have done different surveys or different reports about water education. We'll be looking at different resources. So all this to say is there's a lot of work to be done between now and December of just assessing what's already out there. And we hope that we can tap into you guys to make sure that we get a full breadth of what that is and that we're not missing anything. And I'll explain how we're going to do that in a minute. The one thing that we do know is that there is a lack of representation in a lot of these different surveys, assessments, et cetera, on the K through 12 water education piece. And so we do know that we are going to be incorporating K through 12 into this water education action plan. What that looks like right now, we do not have a firm answer on that, but we are envisioning that it would highlight the K through 12 opportunities that are currently present out there for teachers, school districts, administration, via all these watershed groups, all the different K-12 education you guys are currently doing, and finding a way to highlight that and elevate that into the plan. But we do not anticipate that we would go in at the granular level of identifying exactly how many teachers are using water education and at what grade level and all that stuff. So, but we are looking at incorporating K through 12. So starting in September through February, we're going to be hosting our 4 meetings, and these meetings would include not only the core collaborators, but the collaborators as well. And like I said, this will be a full-day meeting that we're looking to, get as much input and much thought, as much feedback from all of you experts on the ground on what this plan should look like, what would be useful, all of that good stuff. And so some of these are our tentative ideas of possible locations for those meetings. Again, trying to accommodate our vast geographic area in Colorado. And right now we are just firming up some dates in these locations and looking at other water meetings, overlapping with different audiences. Maybe, we're all coming together for a basin roundtable meeting or something. And so we're trying to coordinate these meetings where it makes sense. And so that's just our last final checkoff before we release the dates of these final locations. In February, I mentioned this briefly, but once all of this data, all the stakeholder meetings, everything's been reviewed, everything's been input and compiled, we will bring our core collaborator group back together, and most likely for a full day meeting, that we will analyze everything, we will look at what we have, and at that meeting we will decide on sort of the format taking place and what this is all going to look like. We'll identify the key themes and gaps that are important, all these things that Sophie mentioned as far as our objectives. Once we have all the data, our core collaborators will have an opportunity to brainstorm with us how we best think to piece this all together. And let's see, so February through March, once we have that meeting with the core collaborators, then WeCo staff is going to get busy and put this all into a draft plan format. That draft plan is planned to be completed by March of 2019. Once the draft plan is completed, then it will be released. Released isn't the right word, but it will be given back out to everyone, and we will be open for a public comment period. And so, acknowledging that there may be some updates, corrections, modifications from the first version, we want to provide everyone an opportunity to comment one more time on what this looks like. And so we envision having a full month for the comment period, needing that back by May of 2019. All those comments will then be reviewed by staff and incorporated into the final plan. And our final plan is set to be delivered to CWCB and the rest of you by June 30th of next year. Whew. So with that, there's a lot that could come from it. This is a summary of what Sophie covered earlier. It's just all in one slide. So sort of what our overall goal of working with local stakeholders to identify different strategies and opportunities, what we're looking to identify as far as amplifying your local voices, cross-pollinating education. I mean, you guys can read through all of this. Sophie went through it all in detail, but this is just a reminder of what we're hoping to achieve through this process. And then here's some of the outcomes that we've heard from you all that you would like to see come from this process. What does it actually look like? And none of these are set in stone. This is just to get our creative juices flowing. But identify basin-specific messaging that could be used and possibly cross-pollinated in other basins. Develop a messaging campaign statewide. So if we're trying to get more people to attend basin roundtable meetings or just engage locally with different groups or attend education programs, things like that, is there a state messaging campaign that could pique people's interest and get people engaged locally? Develop information communication tools that can be used. Seek out and apply for statewide funding. So Sophie touched on that a little bit as well. Identify innovative resources. This is a picture of this traveling exhibit from the Denver Zoo. So is there some sort of, messaging or prop or something that we could rotate around the state and community that would boost awareness if that's something that comes up as a need? And then another thing that's come up most recently is all of the basins right now are working with the roundtables and your PEPA liaisons to create individual basin education action plans. Those action plans have to be updated every 3 years. CWCB is overseeing that, and they will still oversee that. But is there a little bit of coordination that can be done as far as the frequency? Right now, all the different basins are renewing theirs at different times, and so maybe just standardizing the time frame in which those basin plans are updated. Maybe standardizing some of the language and outcomes so it is easier to cross-pollinate some of the information or projects, things like that. So again, none of these are, yes, this is what we're doing. This is just what we have heard from people so far, that it's maybe what they would like to see. And again, just to pique some of our creative juices as we're jumping into this process. So next steps, where do we go from here? So we have created what we're calling a collaborator participation form, and you will be emailed the link to this. It's just a SurveyMonkey link, but we are going to be sharing this form not only with you guys who are participating, but people all across the state, other stakeholders. We encourage you guys to share this form for people that should be included in the process. And it's really quick. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out, and essentially this is what we are going to be asking of you, just to kickstart sort of how we are organizing this process going forward. So obviously your contact information, what's your level of interest, and so you'll indicate whether you want to be, a collaborator, a core collaborator, contribute remotely. If you do enter a core collaborator, and again, like I said, that's going to be a small group, and so not everyone will be participating as a core collaborator. And so even if you enter as that's your highest interest, you will still be able to participate as a collaborator even if you aren't on that core group. You'll have an opportunity to sign up for updates if you are not yet on the WEN newsletter list. You'll have an opportunity to indicate your audience, so who do you serve, K-12, elected officials, general public, et cetera. What concerns you may have about this process. We know that, being a statewide process, there's so many different people involved. There, may be some concerns at the local level that we are just not aware about. And so this is an opportunity for us to sort of learn about those concerns up front before we really build a process around something that, might not be the best option. And so there is a place for you to address concerns if you have. If there's additional resources, like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of data gathering and reviewing and analyzing over the next couple of months. And so if you want to be sure that we are aware of something that either you've done or you know of or you've seen, then there's a place to input that. There's a place to input names of additional people that should be included. So if you want to recommend someone or have us forward on this information to someone, there's a place for that. There is a place to indicate which meeting you think you would like to attend. We know that there's no dates associated yet, and that's going to be, a big factor. But you just sort of to gauge how many people will be attending each of the meetings, so we can plan for that. And then there is a last column for any additional feedback. So anything that we haven't thought of, anything you want us to know, anything that excites you that we really think we should emphasize, really, this is your place to provide that additional feedback. And this is a SurveyMonkey, so it's all pretty short, and you will be getting the link to this, like I said. And we will be compiling all of this. Right now, we don't have a cutoff date for when you need to submit any of this. We are hoping to collect and continue to collect any contacts of individuals, organizations, resources, all of that stuff through probably September or October. But once we do have a cutoff date when we need all the information, we will let everyone involved know so they can get that into us. Whew. All right, and that was a whirlwind, an overview of what we have cooking here for our statewide water education action plan. I know we do have a couple questions that are coming in, and so let me see. So one of the first questions we have is, what is the total funding amount with both the Think Water funds and the Colorado Water Conservation funds that we got? In total, WECO has about $59,000 combined to deliver this effort. Let's see. All right, other than that, a lot of people are telling us they can hear us just fine, so that's great. So there's a question, are we only involving paid Water Educator Network members? It would be prudent to include others as well. Yeah, so no, we are definitely not only including Water Educator Network members. So hopefully that question was answered as I went through the process and talked about the different levels. But no, you do not need to be a Water Educator Network to be involved. Of course, we would love for you to be and encourage you to sign up, but that is definitely not a requirement. So there is, so one of the questions was, is there funding to bring everyone together for these different meetings? We do have a small piece of the budget that's allocated towards a stipend for travel for some people, mainly that core group of collaborators. And so there is a small budget. We will be, we can work with you guys all to sort of communicate what that is. It's definitely not a lot. It's not going to cover all of your travel expenses, and it's not a make or break thing. But we would like to be able to help compensate a little bit. But so there is a tiny budget for helping funding travel. Okay, we're just reading some of these other questions, sorry. So there is a question about shared incomes that have come from the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education's Colorado Environmental Education Plan and their regional councils. And and specifically that they've created a common set of metrics. So we have talked briefly with CAE about this process. We have not firmed up what we are wrapping into, you know, what they've done versus what we're doing. We are working with them on the new state standards that are coming out. And so I imagine, yes, this is a great resource for us to tap into. So we will add it to our list. Let's see. Okay, so we're just reading through it, sorry.
Yes, I thought, so one of the questions is, are teacher workshops included? And the answer is yes. Anything that you all are doing that is tapping into the classroom will be included. We're not going to be evaluating what's happening once it gets into the classroom. So it's more about your programs and how they are being integrated into formal education.
And another question is it accurate to say the scope of this plan is for adult education? And I would say no, that is not accurate. We are definitely looking to capture the wide breadth of water education across the state. All right, I think we hit on that. Yeah, so one of the questions is, can you describe a little bit more about how the asset map that OWOW, so Nona Shipman, has been working on will inform this effort? We have sort of a partnership moving forward with Nona for her to be heavily involved in this project. And as her final report is wrapped up in these next couple of days, we will get a better idea of what that looks like. But that report will only be, you know, so big so that people can actually utilize it. And we know that Nona has extensive amount of data that she's collected, conversations, sort of all of this like institutional knowledge that she has now acquired through this process. And so she is going to be heavily involved with incorporating the data that she's collected and the conversations she had along the way. She has spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets that we will be incorporating it. And yeah, I know that her report is going to have some themes, like themes that are broken down by basin on what are the themes that are coming from water education in each basin. So we'll definitely use that information. She's also worked on identifying what are the gaps in each of the basins. And so we'll be using that as a baseline to start with the gap, addressing the gap portion. I'm trying to think. I think she also, Sophie did mention that there's a big component that she sees has heard from people about the evaluation and program planning component of effectiveness of programs. And so we are looking at how we can bring the Think Water model into effectively building programs and evaluating. And so we're hoping to bring some technical training into that because that's been identified. So we don't have all the answers on how the asset map is going to be incorporated, but we have identified some easy places to start. And Nona is going to be working with us throughout the next couple months and the year pretty extensively to make sure that we aren't duplicating efforts and that we're actually utilizing the effort that she has done. Let's see, more questions. So another question on how that effort, the asset map that Nona was doing, is different from this SWEAP effort, the Statewide Water Education Action Plan. And so Nona really worked hard at sort of going out and compiling all the information and getting, taking a first stab at getting the lay of the land on what's going on with education, what's the climate of water education across the state. And so this SWEAP effort is going to take that to the next level. Like I said, we don't want this to be just another plan that's rolled out, just another report, another assessment. We're really hoping that we can take all this information and create some actionable goals that as a state we can move forward with, create tools, resources that actually are helping us move forward in our water education mission. And so this will have some more defined actions and defined deliverables, as well as hopefully some resources continuing on to actually implement those.
Another difference is that Nona's project didn't evaluate K through 12 specifically. That was an intentional move on her part, just given the scope and the timing and the amount of resources that they had. But we will be incorporating some K through 12, mostly what non-formal educators are doing to enhance K through 12 efforts. So we'll be also looking at that.
And this is Jayla. One more thing to add there is that the kind of 1-2 punch of the asset map and then creating this plan was actually envisioned through the water plan. So you can actually identify both of those steps into getting to this point. If you go to chapter 9.5 of the water education chapter of the water plan, so it was always envisioned that that identification of what are the existing climate of water education is and where those gaps are would lead into the development of this plan to address them.
All right. And I'm thinking that is all the questions. Are there any last minute questions that people want to get in? I'm just reviewing one more time. I apologize for the awkward silence. All right. Okay, well, with that then, sorry, just one last check. Okay, yeah, so I think we're good. So with that, so you, like I mentioned, this is all being recorded. You guys will get a follow-up email from us. So that follow-up email will include not only the recording for this that you can watch back as many times as you want because it was so fabulous, but also you can forward it on to anyone that's interested in the process, and it will include a link for that SurveyMonkey. So this is the first step of us compiling information and building our stakeholder list. So please fill that out if you're interested in participating. I think you all know how to get a hold of us. It's either Stephanie, Sophie, or Jayla at yourwatercolorado.org. And we would love, if you have individual questions, comments, concerns, we'd love to hear from you. But we are very, very much looking forward to getting around the state and learning more from all of you for engaging in this process with us over the next year. We are excited to see where it goes. And with that, I think, do you guys have any other last minute send off?
No, I would just say thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys. See you soon.
All right. Thanks much.